Hey everyone, welcome to Age of Reason. Today is Sunday, November 30th, 2014. We are a live stream show out of Yokohama in Japan that promote positive atheism, knowledge, common sense. Today with me is Daniel Smith from America. And actually, you're gonna do most of the talking today, I think. So I don't think I have anything to say about the last show in particular. I do want to talk about politics, and we'll get to that later. But why don't we start with you? Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And so it's interesting because your story is actually, you spent half of your life as a Christian, right?
Mm-hmm, right.
And the other half, or more than half now, as an atheist.
Close to half, yeah.
And so, how did you get here, and how did you start? I mean, how did you grow up?
Yeah, the first thing is, the first half of my life was about 22 years, is growing up in Texas. And I grew up in a family that went to church. We went to what they call the Church of Christ. I grew up in a family of 5 kids and parents and grandparents, and all of us went to church. And so all my friends growing up through junior high and high school were kids from the church.
Yep.
And all my influences at that time were Christian and religious influences. Other than science class at school, maybe, it was religion. And I had a lot of religion, and I went to church Sunday morning for the morning worship service, Sunday evening, and then Wednesday evening, and then as a teenager also they had youth group activities, and I would go to that on Monday night or some other night. So 3 to 4 times a week I would be at the church building participating in some kind of religious thing, and so that was my upbringing. And then I went to university. This is in Texas. I went to Abilene. I lived in Abilene, which is a city there of 100,000 people, and I went to what's called Abilene Christian University and graduated and studied mostly either to be a preacher or to be a youth minister or to be something related to the church. And so up till age 22, I was totally involved in that. And then mostly out of curiosity, I wanted to go somewhere, and I was influenced by missionaries to go to some other countries. So I chose, for various reasons, I chose Japan, and I came at age 22 to Japan, and that was my first time to get away from religion, first time to get away from the church.
But your objective in Japan was to kind of spread the faith.
Well, at least I was influenced by missionaries that I ought to go to another country and learn something. And so I had an interest in getting away from America and learning a second language, purely out of curiosity, but it was all through people I knew at the church, through introductions and whatnot, that led to the job that I was hired to be an English teacher in Japan. So it was all through the religious people that I ended up in Japan. But once I got here, that became the beginnings of the second half of my life.
Well, sure, yeah. So what do you remember most about the growing up, though, going to church? I mean, what events stick with you up to this day?
Well, the fact that I went to the church building, and then that, of course, the building itself changes because we moved and went to a different congregation, maybe a different part of the city or whatnot. But I always went every Sunday, and this is nonstop for those 22 years since I was born. We never missed. It was just not accepted to miss. So those 22 years of going to church on Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesday night, plus extra Bible study activities and whatnot.
Yeah.
That's what I remember about my childhood. It was just being at the church building, sitting through many sermons, many sermons with preachers, sitting through Bible classes, memorizing the Bible, taking tests on the Bible. They even had contests where you had to show off your knowledge of the Bible.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, other than going to church, I went to school, normal junior high and high school and whatnot. And I was, other than being a member of the marching band, I didn't do anything I wasn't really allowed to participate in much of anything because it wasn't religious based.
Right,
So
right.
all my memories of growing up is basically either being at school taking my classes or being at church all the time.
Yeah, yeah. So when you went to regular school, though, the students that mingled with you were, I guess, both, right? I mean, obviously, a lot of religious also.
Yeah, because that city of Abilene, Texas, has a lot of church-going people and a lot of different churches with Church of Christ and Baptists and Methodists.
Right, right.
Not very many Catholic. And so a lot of the kids I went to school with were also religious.
Right.
And
right.
many of them went to the same church and whatnot that I did too.
Yeah.
But I did have encounters with kids who didn't go to church at all. And
Yeah.
my general attitude at the time was, oh, I have to help convert them.
Right.
I would
right.
invite them to my own church.
Right.
And I would feel guilty if I went out and had a good time at some kind of party or something with friends who were not part of the church. And I would feel bad and guilty that I was doing something wrong if I hung out with kids who didn't
Sure.
go to church.
Yeah. And when you interacted with them in particular, I mean, how did they react to you approaching them and trying to convert them, or
Well,
saying that you'll save them and stuff like that?
in general, I was around so many church-going kids all the time that I didn't really have an opportunity or need to do that very
Right,
often.
right.
But and it's still kind of embarrassing to go out of your way to preach to other kids. But I remember one of my best friends, especially in elementary school and early junior high, this guy named Paul, was not a part of any church or anything at all. But he was a fun kid, and I remember having so much fun hanging out with him.
Yeah, yeah.
To this day, some of my best just kid memories are just hanging out with Paul.
Cool.
And they were never church related. And so I felt a certain kind of guilt. So I would invite him to come, and he did come occasionally to my church.
Yeah.
But that's one I do remember, was inviting him in
Sure.
particular. Other little things, like I was so church oriented that I had all these ideas of rules. And so, for example, in junior high school, I was in art class one day when one of the kids, who, as far as I know, wasn't part of the church thing that I was a part of, pulled out some joints, some marijuana joints, in a clear plastic bag, and he was showing them off to some other kids, right? And I didn't really know this kid very well, and I was sitting in the next table, apparently, doing my painting or whatever. But I saw them. And then I felt that urge, I have to tell on this boy. I have to get him, arrested or something. Because surely drugs are just a bad thing. And so I went very secretly to the principal of the junior high and told on this boy. And he never found out it was me.
Right.
But the principal and other teachers went and sort of raided his locker and searched it, and apparently he got in a lot of bad trouble, and he was very angry that someone had told about it.
Of course.
But from my point of view, it was that urge to be whatever it is, moral or religious
Sure,
or something.
yeah.
And I thought I had to. It was my moral duty at the time.
Yeah.
Now, looking back, I kind of wish I was on his side, hanging out with them instead.
Yeah. Well, you might still get your chance sometime. Okay, cool. So why don't you talk about your story after you came to Japan and like how you got away from that whole process of deconversion, I guess.
The deconversion,
And
exactly.
it's interesting in your case because
Yeah.
you told me, well, off camera, that you didn't read any books in particular.
I didn't, yeah.
And you obviously didn't have enough, like, let's say, atheist people influence.
Yeah, I
you.
didn't.
So
I didn't,
you did it
yeah.
all on your own, and
That's the
pretty
one
awesome.
thing in my life so far that I'm truly proud of, that I did all by myself.
Yeah.
Was that I came to a conclusion that I do not think that the things I was raised to believe in God and spirits and heaven and hell and these things, I came to the conclusion that these things are not real. And I came to that conclusion all by myself. I didn't, in other words, I came to Japan, and that was good. I was just lucky in that sense. I was lucky to get to come to Japan and get away from going to church all the time.
Yeah.
So I think it wasn't my doing. I think it was just luck of the draw that I ended up coming to Japan. But once I got here, for those first 2 years, I was, let's see, I was here, I was working, teaching English. We didn't have the internet running just yet. This is in 1990, so this is a few years before internet was here in Japan. And they're fixing the camera.
It's okay. Keep going.
Over here fixing the camera. Okay.
That's okay.
Let me explain what I'm trying to say here. So how did I go through my deconversion process? The point is, I was here in Japan. Other than going to a bookstore and trying to find English books, there weren't English books to read around me at all.
Right.
And I was very desperate to learn Japanese, so I was studying Japanese daily. I was working at a job where I was only around Japanese people. I was not hanging around with other foreigners, other people who spoke English for those first couple of years.
Sure. Yeah.
I did not have the internet. I did not have English radio. I never watched movies or TV in English because I wanted to fill my time learning Japanese. I didn't read English books. Only English thing I read for about 2 years was the Japan Times occasionally, just to keep up with the news. I didn't have hands on any books that are readily available now about atheism or some books I've since read more recently, The God Delusion, and such books that are popular these days. I didn't have access to anything. I was just going to my Japanese people, around Japanese people, job, teaching English all day in and day out. And in my head, here I am thinking these things over. I stopped going to church at all, and I was just thinking. And I spent 2 years thinking my way through the process of, is this stuff true or not? I literally didn't read any words in any book about atheism or about religion or about God or anything. I just thought it through, and I came to my own conclusion.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, well, you watched my show, and the watchers watch the show. They know, in my case, for example, I was never exposed to that idea of God. I think the first time I really heard about God as a concept, I was probably 13 or 14. My parents, well, I grew up in Switzerland, and in Switzerland, people are kind of a little bit away from religion in general. And my parents are not religious in particular. They're spiritual, if anything. But yeah, they never pushed it on me. Even though when I met that concept, immediately for me, it seemed just, kind of fairy tale, ridiculous.
Well, that's the conclusion I came to.
Yeah.
On my own.
Right.
At age from 22 to 24, I was every day the same routine. I was getting on my bicycle, going to this little, very tiny junior high school in this small town in Japan. I was sort of pretending to teach English to kids.
Right.
And every day I was going back, and I was studying Japanese all the time. But in between studying Japanese and work, my head was just full of philosophical thoughts.
Yeah.
That's all I did. It was think about these things. I was doubting, in other words. Everything that I was raised to know as a Christian up to that point, I had the blinders on for 22 years, and I did not know there was a world out there. And that's what really surprised me, was coming to Japan. My blinders went like this, and I suddenly saw this world that was very, very different than the world I grew up with, and it was very different from the things that I had been taught.
Right.
Yeah. And that was what I noticed more than anything, was noticing that the patterns of life, the patterns we go through on a daily basis, were the same, is what got me. It's not that things were so different, it's the fact that everything was the same. I was raised in a situation in Texas where I was taught that good people are Christians. And that if you hang out with people who are not Christians, that they are evil people or they're bad people.
Right.
And that it's going to badly influence you.
Right.
And I was taught that so much that when I came to Japan, I was so surprised everybody's so nice and normal and acted the way we acted.
Right.
And the patterns, and basically things like how a father treats his daughter or his son, or how a family acts with each other. Because I was hanging out with this girl that I got to know here in Japan, and she had a family, and they were very open and let me come over and visit, and I was dating with her. and watching how this just normal family was normal.
Yeah, yeah,
That really got to me.
yeah.
They're not Christians. They don't believe in this Bible stuff.
Right.
But they acted the same way, that the father went to work every day. The mother was very sweet and kind, came home and cooked and cleaned and took care of the kids. And the father was always busy at night and coming home. But he wanted to take me out for ramen on the weekend or whatever.
Yeah.
Just, it seems so normal. And I was expecting these people that weren't Christians were supposed to be somehow evil or bad or something. And that was the biggest thing that hit me and made me question.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, that's the thing. I think you could talk about it more, I guess, because you actually went to church. But for my image always was the church controls people through fear. Ever since birth, you're put this idea of hell right away, pretty much. You know, if you do anything, if you do any sin, and the sin they also created, and you grew up with this idea that, oh my God, if I do anything out of line, I'll go to hell. I'll burn forever. Yeah. And
well, that just reminded me, and something I want to talk about is guilt. When I was up to age 22, and I came to Japan, I was full of guilt, day in and day out. I mean, I've had so much guilt on me all the time. It was like my shoulders were heavy.
Yeah, yeah.
With the weight of guilt. I always felt, all those years through high school and college, this fear and burden of sin, the burden that I was doing something wrong and that I had to keep these rules I'd been taught growing up. And amongst all the many rules and things you're supposed to follow or do or not do when you go to church, the main one that you feel a lot of guilt of is anything to do with sex.
Right.
Because you're in high school, you're in college, and I never had any sexual experiences through those years. My first was after age 24, which is interesting, quite late. And that I'm kind of embarrassed to admit now. But so anything to do with sex and thinking about girls, I always felt guilt. Heavy guilt.
Right, right.
And so after I'd thought through this process about, do I believe these things I was told, and came to the conclusion that I didn't believe them, suddenly the guilt was just lifted, and that's the feeling, that's an emotion that I remember. Yeah. Not just an intellectual thing. Right, right. It's an emotion I remember of that feeling of guilt just being gone. And to this day, I've never felt so bad like that, all this, like I should feel bad for having done this or not having done that. Not having guilt makes giving up religion well worth it.
Well, we do have guilt in other things. It's just
oh yeah, but in the sense of a religious, you're sinning.
Yeah.
I don't think about it in that sense. I don't think there is sin. I don't think it exists. Yeah. It's just a concept of the church that I don't agree with anymore. So.
Yeah, yeah. All right, cool. So what books can you recommend? Any books that you're reading right now for people?
I read a lot, and yes, I was reading today, and I'll just look it up. This guy, Peter Boghossian.
Oh, yeah.
He has this book called, what's the title? A Manual for Creating Atheists. Peter Boghossian, I think, and I'm in the middle of my second read of that book. Very good, about strategies when you talk to people, religious people, about helping deconvert them, helping them to give up the idea of using faith as an epistemological way to knowledge. Yeah. Giving up on that. Faith doesn't bring you to knowledge. Only.
Yeah, and when we talked before, you said something about faith, actually. You had a problem with that concept.
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot. The two uses of the word faith, and a lot of people don't notice this. Faith is equivocation is the term, when you use the same word with different meanings in different contexts, and then use it with one meaning in one context and then with a different meaning in another context. and then expect those to be the same
Right.
and argue that they're the same. Faith has two meanings. I've seen this over and over and over. Faith has two meanings. There's the general sense of faith that is based on evidence. I have faith that my father is going to help me out if I get hurt or get in the hospital or need some money or something. I have faith. I can call up my dad, and he's going to help me out.
Right.
Why do I have that faith? Because of the evidence up till now that he has been helpful to me.
Right.
I have the faith that little things. If I throw this around and I don't catch it properly, it's going to fall down and get broken. Because I've seen things fall down and get broken so many times.
Right.
I have the faith that when we get finished filming this show, I can go home and check it and it'll be on YouTube.
Yeah.
Why? Because up to this point, whenever we filmed and uploaded stuff to YouTube, it's always been available later.
Yeah.
So there's that slight chance it won't be available based on some problem, but the faith is appropriate because it's based on the pattern that's repeated over and over and over.
Right.
And that's the sense that people in religion use faith initially. They use it that we trust something because of apparently the evidence. But then as time goes on, there isn't any evidence, and so this other meaning of faith that's used all the time in religion is what this guy says, Bogajian says, after all, faith is by definition the belief in something regardless or even in spite of the evidence.
Yeah.
So that's the other meaning of faith. Right. No evidence, regardless of evidence. And my meaning I prefer is when, we have evidence and we're relying on that evidence regularly to create a pattern.
Yeah.
These two meanings get mixed in the same conversation.
Yeah, that's
And that's
true.
equivocation, and that becomes a big problem.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're right. I think, exactly. They believe in something that has no evidence. And we talked about this on Skype the other day. You also said it. Science is the only method we have of properly analyzing evidence, because you identify the problem first, you investigate it, you come up with a theory, you investigate the theory, and you come up with some kind of conclusion. If it doesn't work, then you make a new theory and you test that. It's just nobody created anything different. That's
exactly. I have a pet peeve about people's uses of the word science. As if setting science is just this one realm, and there are other realms. And I disagree. There are no other realms but science. The word science, if you think about the most basic foundational meaning, is just as you said. We observe things. I even wrote this down. I want to look through my list here because I wrote it down last night.
Yeah, go ahead.
Misuse of the word science, demonization of the word science. This really bothers me. Science is observing, it's experimenting, it's analyzing, it's demonstrating, and repeating that over and over. It's just observing the world around us, thinking about it, analyzing it, using logic, experimenting with it, thinking about it, coming to some kind of conclusion, and then repeating that process over and over and over and over and over. So everything that a person in religion claims is a science claim. If they tell me that because it says in the so-called Bible such and such, then I have to use my eyes to read it.
Right.
I have to observe. I have to listen to what they're saying. I have to think about it, analyze, experiment with it. Just as you said, what else is there? There is only science. That is all of our ability to use our senses to gather information. Even in religion, they want to give you something and ask you to believe it.
Right.
And in a sense, that's a science claim because they're asking you to think about it, observe, experiment with it, do something with it. Anyway, so
well, you said actually the first word you said is demonization of science, and I that's something that really pisses me off because, well, a lot of people in America, for example, they use things like the computers and cell phones, but at the same time they say sentences like, "Oh, but I don't believe in science," but you're using it. Hello,
yeah. Yeah, well, that's sort of a paradox or an oxymoron, I guess, whatever. To say you don't believe in science is not saying anything. You're not making any statement that has any validity.
Right. Exactly.
Science is just observing the world and using that information and making use of it. So this demonization of the word, I think one thing we can do in our daily lives is kind of avoid the word science now and take it to one level down. Talk about observing, gathering information, experimenting, analyzing this information.
Yeah.
Because it's harder to demonize those things. But it's easy to demonize just a word.
A word,
science.
Yeah, that's true.
It's also the opposite is true. We in the what you would call the atheist community demonize the word faith. Appropriately, maybe it's appropriate, but still we do that. We take this word faith and make it out to be this really terrible bad thing. Because it's useful to demonize a word and then help make your the same thing happens. We're going to talk later about the Koch brothers. People will demonize the word socialism.
Yes.
At first they set socialism as a very bad thing. They demonize it itself.
Right.
And then they call him a socialist.
Exactly. Yeah. Even though in Europe, for example, even in Japan, I guess, I suppose, most of it is socialism. Most of the programs like education, hospital, healthcare. I mean, I never understood, for example, the big outrage with the healthcare thing in America.
Yeah, the big outrage with the healthcare.
I'm watching that debate, right? And I'm thinking in my mind, it's just one question that keeps popping up. It's like, okay, so you have a choice of a bill, right, that you get. Would you like to pay more or less? I mean, that's such an obvious choice. But people actually, a lot of people still side it with, well, I'll pay more because I'm used to it. And, my Republican Party tells me that if we do it cheaper, then it's going to be lesser quality and stuff like that. I mean, it's just crazy.
Well, they get a mindset, and then they talk about it. Talk about a perfectly valid thing, something that generally the people of the world over agree that sharing, some point of sharing here, everybody gets sick. Let's make sure everybody gets health covered.
Exactly.
That isn't and can never be a bad thing.
Exactly.
It can never be a bad thing for everybody to get health coverage, or at least health treatment for medical problems. But how they provide this treatment,
that's the thing,
is what these people are arguing about, and they set up something like socialism. Social medicine, they call it.
Right.
Well, I'm for social medicine at the same time that I'm for capitalism.
Exactly.
And within the capitalistic system, I'm for social medicine. I think that's one area that we as a society are all better off if we provide medical treatment to everybody. So that we can all have the health to go out and, on a personal basis, do one job or another job.
That's right.
To create products and services.
Just to finish off before you jump to the next pet peeve of yours, I guess. The health thing, well, I'll just give two quick examples to people, especially, well, most of my watchers are in the States, so just an idea. In South Korea, the healthcare is so cheap that I know people personally, they go to a clinic every day because they can afford it. It's a bit extreme, You really don't need to do that. Usually it's old people.
Yeah, it's old people. People are lonely and looking for something to do.
Exactly.
Going to the doctor gives them something to do.
Exactly. But it's very, very, very cheap. It's extremely cheap. In Japan, you can get an MRI scan. You can get an X-ray the same day, and all of that, you still pay less than $100 with health coverage. I'm sure in America and even Canada,
I can't even think about
more.
And I have a lot to say about the health industry if given the time, but let's save that for another.
Let's save for another show.
Show.
So why don't you jump to the next?
Well, I have a list of things when I talk about religion that this list basically things I think about a lot, and some of them are things I don't hear anybody else writing about or thinking about. It's almost as if I came up with them on my own. Maybe I did. I don't know. I'm sure other people talk about some of these things, but these are my sort of pet peeves when it comes to religion. This one is about using the word God. People, especially in religion and generally people everywhere, use God with a capital G as a proper name.
Right.
We're talking about an entity or a being that doesn't exist.
Right.
Yet we talk about it as if it exists.
Right. Yeah.
And the
It's
religious
true.
people want to do that, and are going to do that normally because they want to believe in this imaginative thing.
Yep.
But we, on the other spectrum, who don't believe in this thing, should be careful with our languages.
Yeah.
And I don't like to use the word God because I don't think there is any kind of a God.
Right. Right.
So I've started to use the phrase, the supposed God, to remind myself and remind my listener that I don't buy into any of this crap.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I
know
encourage.
some people write it with a lower G, but
Yeah.
you're still using the word. And you're right. Yeah. I mean, well, I have 2 cats, for example.
Yeah.
For them, I think I'm like a god because I give them
Yeah,
food, I
sure.
give them water,
Yeah.
Take care of the toilet. It's just a relative step, but
Well, this God that people are talking about,
he's the creator of everything. So that's
it doesn't exist for
Right,
me.
right.
So, so I don't want to give it anything a proper name. But there's different people who are talking about some kind of entity, and I choose. I know it's going to be hard for other people to go along with this, and that's fine. But it takes a little bit of going out of your way to talk like this. But I would like to say regularly, the supposed God, or
Right.
any language that lowers the status of this
Yeah.
imaginative being, that it only exists in words anyway.
Yep.
So I do the same with the Bible, because when you look at the Bible, it often says the Holy Bible as a title
Yeah.
on the outside, and they're using the word holy,
right.
which is pointless to me because I don't think
Yep.
it's holy at all. And so I don't like to say the Bible. I would like to call it the so-called Bible.
Yeah.
To me, the so-called Bible is just a collection of writings.
Yeah.
And it's such a collection of writings that historically has come to its point now, but many people disagree, or scholars disagree, on what books should be kept in this collection and what shouldn't be kept in this collection. It's just a collection
Yep.
of writings.
Yeah.
It's not really a whole,
Yeah.
except for the people much later who want to make it a whole.
Right. Right.
And so to me, it's not a whole. It's just many writings put together and
Right.
written by people, mostly men,
Yeah.
from a long time ago. And it's the so-called Bible,
Yeah.
as well as the supposed God.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the kind of language I want to encourage people to use. But another big pet peeve, when I think about this supposed God, it's it's not just an imaginary God. I've heard that said a lot. Your imaginary God, your imaginary thing in the sky. And I think that's an appropriate way to describe it. But my point is that the supposed God is not just imaginary, it's imaginative, which is a different meaning. It's imaginative. Every day when any person steps into a church building and starts discussing about this supposed God, everything that comes out of their mouth is imaginative.
Yeah.
In other words, what is this thing?
Yeah.
Well, I can't see it,
Right. Can't
so I have to
smell it.
imagine. Can't
Yeah.
smell it, can't register on my senses, I
Yeah.
can't register on any kind of measuring devices.
Right.
So each and every 100% of anything said about this supposed God, I have to imagine.
Yeah. That's true.
Everything.
Yeah.
So it's imaginative from the
Yeah.
point, from the get-go. So if they talk about Jesus Christ, I have to imagine what this person is or did or where they were. So everything they talk about Jesus Christ to me is only in the mind. It's imaginative. And it's no different for me than if you watch a movie, okay,
Harry Potter.
Hannibal Lecter,
Okay. Yeah.
famous character
Yep.
in a story, in a movie. We can discuss Hannibal Lecter. We could probably discuss hours about Hannibal
Yeah.
Lecter. But it's still just an imaginative
Right.
thing and an imaginary character. And that's my point about
Yeah,
that.
and it's interesting because throughout history, God recedes more and more as science progresses. I mean, I know it's in the Bible. You know, people really thought that God, well, the supposed God, lives in the sky, in the clouds, and of course, People went to space and they looked around. Yeah, we can't see him. So then they said, oh yeah, but wait a second. It's true. Yeah, he's not in the clouds, but he's the creator of everything.
Yeah.
So.
But it's still imaginative.
Right, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
And this is a point that I think every religious person in the world will have to admit at some point that they think this thing exists, but still it's imaginative because you can't discuss it outside of your mind.
Yeah.
We cannot find any physical
Right,
thing.
right.
Even though some people would disagree on that point, they might think this
Yeah.
their toast that looks like the shape of
yeah.
a face that they claim looks like their Jesus
Right.
is evidence or something. Those small things aside, everything about religion is a house of cards.
Yeah, yeah.
It's imaginative.
Yeah.
It's talked about only in the mind. I cannot find a difference. So I have what I call the E.T. theory of religion.
Wow.
Now, E.T. being the Spielberg film.
Okay, yeah.
E.T.
Yep.
I saw E.T. in maybe junior high or high school, and I loved it. It was a great film. I saw it 3 or 4 or 5 times. So most of us who have seen the film E.T. know that there's this character, whom we call E.T.,
Right.
who ends up phoning home, hey,
Yeah,
people
yeah.
home, and rides in makes the bicycle fly,
Right.
and other things. Very cute character. Okay, so my point is that if Spielberg, in this day and age, is bright enough and smart enough and creative enough to come up with such a cool movie,
Mm-hmm.
what is different about Spielberg and all the people who lived several thousand years ago?
Right, right.
That's my E.T. theory of religion. What is the difference creative-wise? If all these movies that we watch regularly and pay so much money and Hollywood produces, just last week I was watching the X-Men series, and I was having fun because I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But these are all just characters created in the minds of
Right.
very creative people.
Yeah, yeah.
What is different about the creativity of all these movie makers and people who write fictional books? Stephen King, for example, interesting. What is different from them and what we read in the Bible? Why couldn't the people of that day and age create things that were cool?
Yeah.
Stories that are cool. Jonah and the whale, and,
Right, right.
and Noah and the ark, and these things.
Yeah,
What
because
if
people were bored.
they
back
were the
then.
Spielberg of the
Yeah,
day?
Perhaps, yeah, yeah. It's possible.
Well, I can't find any logical reasons why just the difference between several thousand years, why the people of that day and age must have been creating things too.
Oh, yeah, for sure, yeah.
And here we have this so-called Bible that has all these stories in it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, before movies came, theater was huge. Everybody was Shakespeare, of course. Theater was huge. I mean, people went to the theater.
Yeah, went to the theater. Yeah.
And they watched a play. And again,
That
that
the
was
movie
their
and
creative.
TV of the day. Yeah.
That was the TV of the day. So yeah, back then I guess it was scripture. You.
Well, I've always had a trouble with the so-called Bible because it's early writings.
Yeah.
It's not the only writings from the day because scholars can look at a lot of other writings,
Sure,
Roman age writings that they have available to analyze.
Yep.
But there's very few
Right.
compared to the books we have now. And they didn't have the printing press. They weren't
Right.
able to print these books. They had to write with a hand,
Yeah.
and not even with ink on paper. It was papyrus and
Right,
other
right.
other kinds of older technologies.
Yeah. Stone tablets.
Even stone tablets,
Yeah.
and the method of getting these letter-shaped characters down on some kind of thing that's not even paper was very difficult for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they would have to copy these things.
Right.
So whatever writings that are left over from those ages, the so-called Bible is one of the earliest ones.
Yeah.
And that alone is enough to kind of take me back and go, it's a little
Yeah.
too, it's one of the first things mankind came up with.
Yeah.
I don't find it very trustworthy.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Or I don't find it trustworthy at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just one of the first things
That's
people
fair.
came up with. It's just simply too old to have much
credibility.
It doesn't have any value
Yeah.
except historical now.
Right, right.
It just has historical value. It doesn't have any value.
Some.
Well, like morally or anything. I don't think the Bible has any value
Right.
outside of being writing, telling us what the people of the day were thinking.
Exactly. Yeah. I agree. All right. What else do you got?
I got my list of things. I got a lot of stuff on it. I want to talk about my reaction to the concept of deities
Okay.
and this word worship.
Yeah.
It just doesn't sit well with me. This idea of worship.
Yeah.
Worship. I want to say that word. Worship services. What do they do when they worship? They're bowing to, hey,
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
so
yeah.
great. You're so. The whole idea of worship turns me off. It's a feeling of grossness. The idea that you would have a deity and that you, for some reason, would worship
Right,
this
right.
deity. So when they call a church service a worship service, that to me is like noise to my ears. I don't want to hear about.
Did you also
Worshipping.
have, well, I don't know, obviously, at your church. I went to church once, and at the end of that service, people gathered near the altar, and they were like crying.
Oh,
Oh,
we did.
was the same as yours, or?
A little different, but there was going down the aisle, coming forward, they would call it. The preacher would have his sermon, and he always ended the sermon with the same. And now I invite you, if you're feeling the need to come before the congregation and open your heart or to confess sins or something, please come forward now.
Right.
And people would do it. They would. Not every Sunday, but almost every Sunday, someone would choose to walk down the main middle aisle and sit in the front pews and fill out some little white card and write down what they want to, either a sin they want to confess or they have some problem. And there was a lot of, tearful stuff and the singing and the praising and talking about praising God and that sort of thing. And that's what turns me off. This idea of worshiping, to me, is a very foreign, it's a very foreign concept, and it's weird. It leaves a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah, and the thing with worship is, it doesn't necessarily need to be a deity. You can worship a living, breathing man. But even that I have issues with.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? Why would you lower yourself?
Yeah. To the.
I don't know. It's very bizarre.
I find it bizarre now that I've given up on religion, and looking back, I can't believe that people did these things. And so here's one along those lines. You take the story about Abraham and Isaac, and you were talking about that in one of your recent shows I was watching. And the weird part for me, when I hear the story of Abraham and Isaac, is not what everybody else points out as weird. The weird that this father would try to kill his own son. We all look at that and go, I can't believe that would happen. And even if God later said, we'll stop him or something.
Right.
That's the weird part of the story that most people point out. The part I point out is the idea of sacrifices in the first point.
Yeah.
Whenever I read this story, the idea that here was Abraham apparently talking in actual conversations, language itself, with this deity.
Yeah.
But yet this deity wanted an animal to be burned on an altar with wood. This whole idea of sacrificing, of burning animals to a deity is so weird to me.
Yeah.
And that's the part of the story that gets me. It's like people just let that part slide. They say, God in the end told him, he put Isaac up on the altar or the wood and was about to light the fire.
Right.
And his son's like, God, Dad, what are you doing here?
Right, exactly.
Don't worry, son,
It's okay, yeah.
But people who listen to the story go, but this whole thing about the father and trusting God and blah, blah, blah. To me, I'm looking at it, I'm going, what's this whole thing about burning things?
Yeah, they always
laying
do that.
animals.
They always do that. Yeah, Noah, the first thing he does after getting out of the boat, he makes a burning sacrifice. Yeah, it's.
So the fact that these sacrifices existed in the Bible is enough. Right there, we're finished. this is something that superstitious people created.
Yeah, and
There isn't any real supposed God behind all this.
Exactly.
It's just superstition.
And obviously,
It
I'm
is
probably going to
superstition.
make a mistake now, but I think it's the Mayans or the Aztecs. They sacrificed humans actually.
Yeah,
to-
apparently some groups have done that over the years.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, it's not just
This
them,
the idea of sacrificing anything at any time, especially burning something,
Yeah.
is meant to please
Right.
the deity.
Yeah.
And people let that slide in the Bible as if it's just God. Their supposed God wants that.
Yeah.
The supposed God wants animals to be burned on a pile of wood. Really, that to me is so weird that I can't get past it.
Yeah, I don't think this supposed God that is so powerful would order such a small thing to happen. I think likely it's just the people of the time. They did that a lot.
And
they just put it in
it's
the Bible.
obvious
That's all.
that that people are superstitious. They came up with
Right.
this idea that there must be deities, must
Yeah.
be a deity, and then surely the deity gets hungry, so let's
Right.
burn him. It's the same thing right now here in Japan. There's Shintoism or whatever.
Yeah.
People put little things of food in front of these little altars in their
Yeah.
house. They put rice and
Yeah.
sake and things.
Right. That's true. Yeah.
It's the same concept that
Yeah.
these spirits or souls or whatever must get hungry or must
Right.
need. When the pharaohs or whatnot in Egypt buried the
Exactly.
mummies, they
Yeah,
apparently
yeah.
put a lot of things
Right.
in there, maybe food as well,
Sure.
because they obviously need food in this other life.
Yeah.
So this concept of sacrificing is a superstition. It's time to let it go the way of Zeus and other myths.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. If you talk to religious people, you tell them, "What do you think about Zeus?" And they go like, "Oh, Zeus, that's ridiculous."
Yeah.
Well, that's the way I feel about what's his name? I forgot. But anyway, your god, the one that you believe in. Same thing.
Yeah.
Zeus also had evidence.
Yeah.
There were temples built for him, but doesn't mean that he existed. Again, it was just a thing.
It's an imaginative
Exactly.
thing. And once you get into talking about Hannibal Lecter, we can talk about him all day long.
Yeah,
Because it's not. There's a difference that I don't hear very many atheists pointing out. People who believe in their supposed God, this God does exist for them
right.
in their minds.
Yeah.
Just as Harry Potter exists for all of us
Yeah.
when you read the books.
Right.
It exists. There's a.
Yeah.
I know what he looks like. I know what he does. I know what he did. I know who he dates. I know all these facts about Harry Potter in my mind within the fictional story. And everything that people talk about religion is the same. It's within the bounds of this fictional arena.
Right.
And they can talk about it all day long. The Holy Spirit, this and that,
Yeah,
and write books
yeah.
about it. If you go into the library of a religious person, they have many, many books by many scholars talking about their version of Hannibal Lecter or Harry
Right.
Potter or Superman or X-Men or whatever character you want to come up with. Because we as humans have imaginative brains. That's my E.T. theory of religion. We are very imaginative. We are very creative.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll cut you off here for today, and I'll
Good.
do my little bit. And obviously, you can participate. I gave you the list.
Participate.
So we're gonna talk briefly about the Koch brothers because I dipped into politics in my last show, and I can't find the paper anymore. It's here
So
somewhere.
it's the Koch brothers. I keep wanting to call them the Koch or the Koch or something.
It should be the Koch brothers because they come from Germany, I guess.
Yeah,
So,
but it's Koch in America.
oh, there I found it. Yeah, for some reason, yeah, it's very strange. Anyway, this is pretty long, so I will not cover everything in today's show, but I'll start. This is a bunch of stuff that they support, and not all of them are actually bad. I just read a few of them, and I was like, well, actually, yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, very few. You can count that on the finger. The first thing is they say we urge the repeal of federal campaign finance laws and the immediate abolition of the despotic Federal Election Commission. Well, I actually agree with that one. I think the election process in America is an abomination. It's such a show that's once one election is finished, the next one already starts. The money is there, and they just keep going. So yeah, I don't support that. Okay, we favor the abolition of Medicare and Medicaid programs. That I have an issue with.
I do too. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine if you want to abolish them, but what do you have to replace that?
Right, I agree. Yeah.
If they actually continued that sentence, well, we will abolish that, but we have this, this, and this to replace it. Well, then we have to judge what their plan is. But
well, they don't have a plan. They want it to be just laissez-faire, free and open. Corporations and companies providing services and people paying for them,
right,
and not having any sharing to people who are poor.
Right, exactly, yeah.
And if the United States followed a system that the Koch brothers encourage, which is where you give up and abolish, as they say, these systems, then what's going to happen? Well, it's obvious what's going to happen. We're going to have a lot of people who can't get medical treatment at all.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But on the other hand, we say that, but we cannot predict the future. I am kind of curious what would happen.
Yeah.
Would little services spring up where they charge less and less and less instead of charging more and more and more because there's such a
wider playing
field. I don't know. It's kind of the problem of, like with science, if you can run a test with a control. But when you're talking about the whole country, you can't. It's very difficult to run a test, and you can't rewind the path to the past.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I feel that the programs that do spread the wealth around, share wealth, and help people in times of need is very helpful. I think we need more of those kind of programs.
We need more, okay, let's see. We still have time? Yeah, we do. Okay. Next one is we oppose any compulsory insurance or tax-supported plan to provide health services, included those which finance abortion services. Okay, obviously they're against abortion. I don't know what's your take on it, but I'm pro-abortion in general. I mean, because people should have a choice.
Well, I want to make my comment about abortion. It's too short of time to make a very in-depth comment, but I find abortion itself to be a paradox, a kind of paradox you can't get out of. We don't want to kill babies. We all agree with that.
Yeah.
We don't want to kill babies, but we also don't want unwanted babies.
Right. That's true. That's very true.
And we also want people to have freedom with their bodies.
Right.
And medical freedom. But we don't want to kill babies. But we don't want. And it becomes this paradox.
Yeah. I agree.
And there are a lot of paradoxes like that in life, and you have to come down on one side or the other.
Yeah.
And I would come down on the side of I hate to admit it, but the world is ever so slightly better off by allowing legal abortion. And giving that choice each and every time to that person.
Exactly, I agree. Yeah.
Instead of all of us making the choice for that person.
Exactly.
Letting that person make that choice on a one case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
So that the rest of us don't have to make that choice for them.
Yeah, I agree. I said it on a previous show, I think. Somebody wants to get an abortion, and even complete strangers to that person suddenly feel that, well, it's my goddamn business too, and I'm going to say my piece. And I'm going to tell that person why it's bad. It's not your kid.
You know what the real problem is? It's getting pregnant. Is the problem.
Yeah.
And that's the other paradox. People don't want to get pregnant, but they want to have sex. But they don't want to get pregnant, but they want to have sex.
Yeah.
And these things don't work well.
Yeah.
And so people end up getting pregnant when they don't want to get pregnant.
Yeah.
Because they want the other side, and they're not very good and knowledgeable about how to prevent it, but you still have, and so it becomes this bigger problem.
Yeah, I mean,
what are we going to do about it?
Birth prevention is a thing.
That's the thing.
Again, religion opposes that.
Yeah, So they oppose. It's crazy.
The next one, and just a few more before we wrap. 23 here. We also favor the deregulation of the medical insurance industry. Okay, well, that actually we do know what happened when that happened, because the insurance companies just hike the prices and they just completely screw people. They throw people off for pre-existing conditions, stuff like that. So that we do know.
I agree with you that we disagree with the Koch brothers on this one. I want to make a quick comment about regulation, the word regulation.
Yeah.
They do that with what they do with science or the word socialism. They demonize the word regulation.
That's true.
Which, let's stop doing that, because regulation, all it does is make things regular. We're trying to regulate them, make them more even, make them better for everybody. And so my take on that is the statement, there's too much regulation, is not a proper way to state something.
Yeah.
Because you have to take each and every regulation on its own merits. We have to discuss each and every regulation. Some are good, some are bad.
Sure.
We have to vote on each and every one. It's a lot of work, but you can't just say all of them, there's too many of them.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense to say there's too many of them.
I agree, yeah.
Some are needed, some are not needed, and we need to discuss each and every case.
I totally agree. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that.
And in this case, I think we should regulate insurance and provide it for everybody.
Yeah.
So that everybody's money goes into the pot, and then everybody gets medical treatment.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, and let's do one more, I guess. So 22. We favor the repeal of the fraudulent, virtually bankrupt, and increasingly oppressive Social Security system. Pending that repeal, participation in Social Security should be made voluntary. Well, I don't know. I mean, I know a lot of people who kind of rely on the social insurance, Social Security.
Well, I'm going to just say I don't know enough about it.
Yeah, me neither.
I'm just not in depth enough on Social Security, whether I think the particular system we have now in the United States is good or not. But I think in general we need some kind of system.
Yeah, every country has something, so yeah.
I think we need some kind of system, yeah. So
Okay.
I'm not going to make any more comment on that.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess one more just to wrap. So 21, that's pretty long too. Oh yeah, that one actually made me laugh, because why would you do that? But okay, we propose the abolition of the governmental postal service. God, I hate the postal service. Why? The present system, in addition to being inefficient, encourages government surveillance of private correspondence. Pending abolition, we call for an end to the monopoly system and for allowing free competition in all aspects of postal service.
Well, this list comes from apparently 1980 or something.
Probably, yeah.
When
it's not new, yeah.
Their libertarian platform, right? So this is kind of old news now, because it's not a monopoly, and with Federal Express and DHL and other other companies competing to deliver things, it doesn't seem like. I think it seems like these days the Postal Service is just another competitor.
Yeah. I mean, there's always like the Postal Service, kind of the main one, but they do have a lot of competitors.
Well, I'm kind of along the lines of, there are certain things in life we need to all share.
Yeah.
I disagree. They have one where they want to get rid of public roads, right?
Yeah. That's right.
I'm for sharing certain things. I'm for having my garbage picked up out in front of my house done by the city.
Right.
And paying taxes to get that done. I'm for when I walk out on the street and have a sidewalk to walk along, and that it's nice and pretty and the bushes are cut. And it's public and anybody gets to use it. I'm for electricity and internet services being somewhat publicly based, so that everybody gets them equally. But I understand their idea that if it's all free, capitalistically based, that somehow the services are going to be better.
Yeah.
Competition makes for better service. And I agree with that to a point. So I think there's some things in life, it's better to keep them public, and then the majority of things, we leave it up to companies.
Yeah.
So it's okay to have a line drawn
with
some on one side and some on the other.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well that's pretty much all I wanted to do for today. I'll do more next show. There's still many points. Do you have anything to say before we finish this? Anything
Well, I
for
want
the
to say
viewers?
thank you for inviting me over,
Sure.
and that whenever we get on some of these topics, I'm very opinionated and I have a lot to say. And anytime you want me to come around, I will be glad to give. I do talk a lot, so
Yeah, that's cool.
thanks
though.
for listening.
Do you have any advice for religious people who might be watching?
Well, being open to change is the hardest thing when you're involved, not just religion, involved in anything where you have a belief system. As just a weird example, if you're really into American football, the NFL, and you love your team, and there's like this recent thing about the Indians, the Redskins, about changing the name because it's not a very good, it's a racial, offensive name.
Right.
Well, a person who roots for the Redskins doesn't want the change.
That's true.
It's an emotional thing.
Yeah.
And being open to change, okay, change is inevitable. Change is really not that bad of a thing. So if you can somehow kind of let yourself open up a little bit to this idea of change.
Yeah.
It's not that bad of a thing.
That's true.
You just might be wrong
Yeah.
about everything you've ever thought about
That's true.
religiously.
That's true. And it's also, well, just to finish off, I mean, this whole thing with change, even without religion, people are hard to change.
Hard
in
to
general.
change,
Just
in general.
even small things.
Even small things.
The way you sleep or the way you cook, anything.
The way you treat your spouse or something.
Yeah.
These things are hard.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the reasons religion continues to this day and will continue is because the people who are in it pushed for it to continue.
Right.
Because they don't want to change it. Because they've been doing it all their life. Once you get to be 55 years old and you've been a preacher for 25 years or whatever,
Yeah, that's it. I mean.
how are you going to...
Yeah.
It happens occasionally, but it's very rare for that kind of person to go say, the last 55 years of my life was for naught.
Yeah.
Was silly. It was emotionally, how are you going to... The cognitive dissonance that arises from that situation.
Yeah, that's too much.
It's too much. It's very difficult psychologically. Okay.
So we'll wrap here. If people want to join the Facebook page, it's facebook.com/agereason. And if you want to drop us a mail, it's at tv-ageofreason@tv-ff.com. And just before I finish this, I do want to say that I am actually working on a new intro for the show. The reason is I wanted original music to be composed, and I found a guy who is willing to do it. So we'll see how it goes. But it's going to be much better, trust me. I already finished it.
I thought it was really good already, but...
Well, it can only get better, I guess. And so where is my mouse? It's here. So we'll finish here, and the next show will be, I believe, on December 13th, because 14th I'm busy doing another short film. That's my latest thing, my latest torture. All right, so that's it. We'll finish here. Well, have a good night in America, and well, see you next time.